Scott will be speaking from project number 2 of the Speaking to Inform manual, an advanced manual. It's called Resources for Informing. His speech is titled, "The Revolution is Here." He will share with you 3 signs of the current revolution, and his speech will be 7 to 9 minutes long, Madam President. Please welcome Scott Salthun.
They spend all that time just staring at the little device in their hands. It's as if it's telling them what to say, what to do, what to think, what to feel. And forget about communicating anything of a semi-critical nature. If it even has a hint of that, they just shrivel up and tears almost well up in their eyes. And don't even bother with asking them to do you a favor and thinking it's going to happen immediately. They're always just thinking of something creative to do to automate things, or maybe have a robot do something so they don't have to listen to you. Fellow Toastmasters, distinguished guests, we are in the midst of a revolution. And this morning I'm going to share with you 3 signs that I know it's here and where it's going. But first, we have to take a step backwards to realize the difference between the current times and what some of us have experienced. Now, about a year ago this came out, and I think it's pretty accurate, pretty telling, and pretty scary. Now, I'm going to read the left side of this, and the dash side I want you guys to repeat after me, those of you that can see. Our phones?
Wireless.
Cooking?
Wireless.
Cars?
Keyless.
Food?
Fatless.
Hard to believe this time of year there, but we'll keep going. Tires?
Tubeless.
Youth?
Jobless.
Leaders?
Shameless.
Relationships?
Meaningless.
Attitudes?
Careless.
Babies?
Fatherless.
Feelings?
Heartless.
Children?
Mannerless.
We are speechless. Government is clueless. And our politicians are worthless. I will say the last one. Since we are in the house of worship here, I don't want to shake the boat too much, but a little bit of telling. I'm going to go over a few of these areas and see if we can make some conclusions. Now, if we go back in time, top to bottom, the most influential things on our behavior from this time period, if you'll recall, some of you that have lived through this area, home and church back in the 50s, those were pretty standard across our nation. All right, as we got into the 80s, the peer movement developed. And if those of you have heard, I think the best acronym for peers are people who encourage errors, rudeness, and stupidity. And I think you started to see some of that through that time period. Now we get to the 90s, we're starting to have influence of TV and media even more so. Now in the 50s, TV was still around, as you can see, but it became more of a factor. Now in the early 2000s, now you see where the trend is going. Now if I had an additional one here, 2010 on, we might have some things like social media, information, okay, exchange, a lot of different channels that we have to share that. All right, first sign that I would like to go over is affect. And I saw this quote, and I think it really hits the nail on the head, and I experienced this summer. I saw my nephew was playing in an all-star baseball game, and this was for all the marbles. I mean, if the team kept winning here, legitimately, they might be playing out in Williamsport, Pennsylvania in August for the Little League World Series on TV. And his team, I knew it was going to be tough. I'd watched them a few times. They weren't super good, but they made it that far. And they got beat 15-0. And here they are, lining up after the game. The other team lines up along their foul line. His team lined up along there, and they were introduced. First the winning team, obviously, and then they were introduced in the coaches. And I was really baffled. Because I remember when I was, hard to believe, child of the 90s, there was a competitiveness. If you lost like that, I wouldn't want to be introduced. Now, but this is the times we live in. I feel like we do a lot to try to preserve affect. And man, that's hard for me to watch because I feel like, where's that competitiveness come from? What has happened? You know, you see a lot of stuff out there, not only at schools, but in the workplace. No bullying, no bullying. And I think this is maybe part of the problem. We don't have that. People don't stand up always, and there's so much, you know, avoiding conflict and competition that I don't know if we always develop that healthy ability to really feel things. In the book, Not Everyone Gets a Trophy, author Bruce Togan, who is writing about managing the millennial generation, refers to, you know, you have to treat an employee these days now when they first day on the job like it's their kid's birthday. You know, lavish them. Now that is hard to imagine, but you kind of do anymore, don't you? I mean, that has to be the most exciting, coolest thing around, or there's a disconnect. There's that connecting piece that the modern times demand. And you used to, going back to kind of kids, one other example, when you first look at this, you might think that the teacher is telling the student that. Nowadays, I think this is actually referring to that kid saying, oh yeah, well I think you can do better too. I think times have changed. They don't hesitate to say that either. So that changes the whole way we have to communicate. Next sign. We have such a plethora of information in our world nowadays that it's so easy to get somewhere and get access to. You can either speak to Siri or Alexa, things will happen. You can get into a search engine, bam, here you go, you've got the answers. And that's great. The challenge is we live in a pretty complex world with complex problems. So it's not always advantageous to take that approach, like things have to happen quick, delivery has to happen fast. We have to practice more critical thinking and research, adapting to what's there, talking to others, to make sense of things. And there is that connected piece that I referred to. Some of you guys have seen this, I'm sure. In fact, most of the time you see both of them with it. And you wonder, why did you go out and spend $42 to look at a screen and order coffee? No. But, you know, again, going back to the speed, the access to information, you know, we forget sometimes our old high school physical science lesson that there is still a formula for work. And that is force times distance. Problem is, that's really changed because you don't have to apply a lot of force anymore, and you can go, bam, you can find out everything you need to know right there. But that's not necessarily the best solution all the time, right? If you're working together, collaborating, that requires a lot of grunt work. In the book Joy Incorporated, Richard Sheridan writes of relying on deep expertise stifles innovation. And he's founded a company based on this principle, producing joy in the workplace. He is encouraging curiosity among all his employees at his company, and that is the principle that Menlo Innovations is built on. And it's fascinating some of the things he does, everything from the interview process to sitting through testing individuals a day of work. What's it like there? You know, we have to remember, going forward, 65% of today's kids will end up with jobs that haven't even been invented yet. So it's hard to really program things individually with just simply basing it on knowledge. Curiosity needs to explore the innovations and the things that are developing in our world. And the last sign, I think this one kind of combines the first two in my mind, but I'll see if you guys agree with this here. The economic challenges. You know, I read a report in February of 2017, this year, the Bureau of Labor Statistics stated that the average household spends about $7,023 on food throughout the year. Of that, $3,008 are spent eating out at restaurants, which equates to about 43%. Now that's pretty staggering. And I have just a quick example from July of this year, back when I used to have a business partnership with Uber, which I don't anymore, perhaps subject for another speech. I had to do a delivery, Uber Eats, from Old Town Gringos in Scottsdale. I delivered a little Nacho Mama and a little thing of ice cream. Yes, this is July ice cream. You got the freezer bag, it did stay. $18.25 for these two things. I think that's just what the receipt told me, because I think their actual charge was more, but that's hard to say. But I had to take this all the way down to somebody in Tempe, 20 minutes away. And I'm thinking, somebody would really spend this much money on that? For me, I don't even consider that a snack. I'm like, wow, 11:30 on a Sunday, I guess that sounded good to somebody. But that's scary, I think, that people would spend this much to do that. And we have a lot of information at our behest where we really tend to have affective needs, so we want to indulge ourselves a lot. And our savings, our financial management, I think, is really stretched these days. It's difficult. Another area that I did some research on, back in 1960, $2.7 billion of our expenditure in the U.S. was on prescription drugs. In 1980, that climbed to $12 billion. By 2000, it was $121 billion. This year, the estimate, $360 billion that we're spending on prescription drugs. And I think it's kind of a after effect of all the stuff that I've shared. I want to close with a quote here by John Naisbitt. The most exciting breakthroughs of the 21st century will not occur because of technology, but because of an expanding concept of what it means to be human. We have a lot of resources, a lot of tools at our behest, but they should fulfill our needs in a way that we can manage. So as Yogi Berra once said, the future ain't what it used to be. The revolution is here. Recognize it, grow from it, live in it joyfully. But don't let it chew you up and spit you out. Mr. Toastmaster?